McLaren's disqualification changes everything. Everything about this season, about what we have in front of us. Man, oh man, this title has just found a new way to stay interesting. In case you're watching the podcast before having caught up with whatever the hell is going on in Formula One right now, in case you missed it, here's the recap. Following the Las Vegas Grand Prix, both McLaren's, Oscar Piastri's, and Lando Norris's vehicles found in violation of the FIA's regulations on plankwear and were promptly disqualified, forfeiting a P2 for Lando Norris and a P4 for Oscar Piastri. This allowing Max Verstappen to not just tie Piastri for P2 in the World Drivers' Championship, but place him just 24 points behind Lando Norris for the World Drivers' Championship lead, leaving this thing smack dab right there on the table. It's anyone's game as we have 3 scoring opportunities left this Formula One season. So, questions first. I'm sure you're asking, just how thin was the margin for disqualification for the papaya cars, right? 0.12 millimeters on Lando Norris's car, 0.26 on Oscar Piastri's. For reference, a human hair, one of these things, is 0.18 millimeters in width. So the breach of less than a hair's length for the McLaren of Lando Norris, just over a hair's length for Oscar Piastri, but a breach nonetheless, a breach that by the rules is a slam dunk. It is a overwearing of the plank underneath the vehicle. And if you're wondering why does this matter, what's the point of disqualifying your title contenders? What's the point of disqualifying your potential world champion? It's just the rules are the rules. In the words of a Zach Brown and Andrea Stella, if I'm not mistaken, the rules of racing, whether it's 0.01 millimeter, if it is a breach, it is a breach. If it's investigated and found to be a non-compliance, the FIA, as the rules are written, there is no margin for error here. This is a safety precaution on the part of the FIA, and they take these things very seriously. And if you're curious about if this has happened before, just look at what Ferrari did in China earlier this season with a double disqualification there between Lewis Hamilton and Charles Leclerc. So, with that, can Max Verstappen, over these final 2 Grand Prix weekends, across a sprint, a race, and the final feature race in Abu Dhabi, win this title? Is it possible? Do we think that it's going to happen? Will it happen? Remains to be seen. But can he? Simply put, yes, he can. While trailing by just 24 points, this breach of the FIA rulebook is a bellwether for McLaren for these final 2 Grand Prix, who will now have to be extra careful on their ride heights for the remainder of this season to try to gather as many points as possible, remaining legal, leaving the front of the field very much so open for Max Verstappen and a Red Bull that, to this point in the year, behind the leadership of Lauren Mechis, behind the engineering that is there at Red Bull, behind everything that is going on at the Red Bull factory, with the new leadership of Lauren Mechis, by the way, whose whole initiative was to continue developing this car this year to understand exactly what they have on the development side, what they have on the engineering side back at the factory, has kept Max Verstappen very much so in play for this world championship. And honestly, the fact that this championship has reached this point is incredibly interesting. I mean, we've talked about there being, a 2-way fight between Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri, while Max Verstappen kind of hung out in the background all year. But the fact that we have gotten to this point in the season with Max Verstappen still in play, with the championship not done and dusted, Oscar Piastri, the choke job is the choke job, right? He is now in a position to lose P2 in this championship based on the failings of not just himself, but now also of the team. You can make those what you will, but it's possible for Lando Norris to lose this thing too. And you'd have to imagine that for most drivers, this would light a fire under them. This would make them want it that much more. This would make them execute that much thinner on the lines, right? On the margins of pushing but not exceeding the limitations. McLaren pushing and exceeding the limitations in Vegas. Man, just from an excitement factor, I imagine you, the TLPs, are just as excited to see what the hell happens the remainder of this season. But for McLaren, it's high anxiety to claim not just the constructors, which they did a while ago, which is why they've stopped developing this 2025 car. They focused on 2026. They turned their attention. They left their drivers vulnerable. Unfortunately for McLaren, they have two fantastic drivers, but they are not the greatest of the generation, like a Max Verstappen. They are not one of the greats of all time, like Max Verstappen. With all due respect to what we've seen so far from Lando Norris and what we have seen so far from Oscar Piastri, you know, they're going up against one of the greatest of all time, still driving at his peak. And the margins for error are razor thin, as we just found out in Las Vegas once again. But it's not going to be as simple as just winning it out for Max Verstappen. It is not going to be as simple as, you know, Max just needs to win all the way, because he does need to do that. He does need to do that, but he still needs a little bit of help from the McLarens. Looking at a couple of pathways, starting here, Lando Norris at 390 points. If he just podiums with P2s the rest of the way, he still wins this championship by 9 points. Looking at if he gets third place, he still wins this championship by an oh so meager 2 points. This assuming, again, that Max Verstappen wins every single format that remains on the schedule. Qatar Sprint, Qatar's Grand Prix feature race, and then the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix. And let's just say things get a little bit mixed up. Lando Norris has a P3, has a, you know, second place finish in the Grand Prix, but then in Abu Dhabi, things just kind of slip away. He ends up with 10 points. Max Verstappen can win on a tie. He'd have more feature race wins by the end of the season. This is the most chaotic option in my personal opinion. This right here is the pinnacle of madness. This is the unfortunate ending for Lando Norris's title push. This is the inevitable Max Verstappen taking it as a guy who just has more damn wins. But on a true win out, if Lando Norris does not meet the moment, these final three Grand Prix, maybe let's say he gets one more podium, but he just whiffs it, can't quite get there, Max Verstappen can still win this thing. Max Verstappen can still win this thing. And I have to ask you, the viewing audience, I want to know, how much faith do you have in the three of these? Because for record's sake, Oscar Piastri is in the exact same place as Max Verstappen on points. But I hate to say it, if Oscar Piastri cannot win in Qatar, he's done. He's in the same position as Max on points. And unfortunately, myself, and I'm sure many of you, have probably lost faith in him as a world champion in 2025 at this stage. Could he be a future world champion? You know, the future is yet to be written. But this year, it slipped away from him, whether his fault, and in my opinion, largely his fault, or the fault of the team, a mix of both, you know. But Piastri has allowed this thing to slip out of his grasp. I don't necessarily have the same faith that he's going to just reclaim that form and get a little bit lucky. I'm not as optimistic. And as far as Lando Norris, you have to question the faith, right? Who's the most consistent driver here in this mix? At the end of the day, you're going to look at Max Verstappen. A 24-point lead, a 24-point gap, and Lando Norris or Max Verstappen. At this rate, hate me if you want, but I'd call this a 50-50. Because Max is going to drive the Red Bull into the ground trying to win out this season. McLaren seemed to be a little bit slower than the Red Bull since they've stopped the 2025 development and they turned their attention towards 2026. Car setups could very well be the title decider these final 2 weekends. And a massive blow to the title, if any of these three DNF, especially if it's Max or Oscar, this title's basically done. It's over. A 0-point weekend by Lando Norris, however, across either of these next 2 weekends would leave it all on the table in Abu Dhabi for either Max or Oscar to potentially reclaim, depending on the severity, depending on the performance, depending on the timing. Now, again, if Max can't get a win in Qatar as well, it might mean that he's also done in this title fight, barring a 0-point weekend for Lando Norris. But man, it's not going to be an easy path forward. Don't get it twisted. If Lando Norris finds the podium across these final 3 formats, all 3, he wins this title. Simply put, second or third to round it out, he's done. It's over. All he has to do is at least get P3 3 times. It's done. But if he misses the podium in a feature race in both, it's a lot more possible. And Max could just do Max things and win this thing out. So what's the most likely outcome? Look, McLaren are still really quick this year. Red Bull have seemingly pulled ahead. Mercedes have also remained a factor in these fights at the front, mind you. They could play the spoiler in all of this. But they're trying to lock up their P2. They're going to keep remaining a factor. So you can't count out Mercedes in any of these final 3 formats, respectfully, especially for the performances we've seen from their drivers of late. But, man, I can't predict this. Every time I try to predict it, every time I feel like I have some certainty, every time I feel like I know what's going to happen, we see the trends, we see where it's going, a new wrench gets thrown into this battle. A new wrench gets thrown into this fight. And I'm kind of pulling for Max to do it because of just how crazy this would be. I'm kind of hoping that this goes the way of Max Verstappen just because of how improbable this championship has looked at certain times this season, because of how the story, how the regulation itself, how this 4-year stretch could end. He's already won over half the races in this entire regulation, this entire 4-year stretch. He's already won over 50% of them. It's done. It's in the history books. Like I said, I think it's a 50-50. But if you're looking at the whole course of the regulation, I don't know, maybe that teeters one way or the other. I just couldn't tell you. I could not tell you. All I can tell you is, as a Formula One fan, as a Formula One talking head, if you want to give me that much grace, I just can't wait to see what's going to happen on these Sundays. I cannot wait to wake up and spoiler-free, avoid the social media, run straight to watching these races. I cannot wait. I'm so excited, and I know you guys are excited too. What do you guys think is going to happen? Who wins this world title this season? TLPs, have McLaren botched it already? Is it over? Is this Max Verstappen's championship to lose at this stage? Can Max Verstappen win this championship? I want to hear what the TLPs think. I want to know what you guys think. I want to know what you think is going to happen across these final 2 Grand Prix Sundays.